The news didn't break. It detonated. Representative Jasmine Crockett, a rising star in progressive circles, found herself at the center of a federal investigation by the Federal Election Commission, FEC, for alleged money laundering through ActBlue, a Democratic fundraising platform. Fox News didn't ease into the story. It went for the jugular, splashing Crockett's name across screens like a warning label on democracy itself. No allegedly, no according to sources, just a verdict delivered with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. CNN, like clockwork, fired back, framing the accusation as a targeted smear against a black woman daring to disrupt the status quo. Two networks, two narratives, one war. The digital battlefield erupted before most Americans had poured their morning coffee. The hashtag #ActBlue trended globally. The phrase money laundering appeared hundreds of thousands of times online, and Crockett, once a niche figure known for fiery House committee soundbites, became the most Googled woman in politics, not for a speech, but for a scandal. The question on everyone's lips wasn't about policy or ideology, it was simpler, sharper. How do you donate 50 times without knowing it? Behind that question lurked a deeper one. Where was all this money really coming from? Crockett didn't wait for the narrative to solidify. In a phone interview with MSNBC, she dismissed the allegations as a MAGA fabrication, invoking systemic bias, digital noise, and weaponized audits. Her tone was defiant, but one sentence slipped out, heavy with unintended consequence. People don't understand how ActBlue works. The platform, she explained, was designed to move small-dollar donations quickly. Mistakes happen, she said. That word, mistakes, landed like a spark in dry grass. It wasn't an admission of guilt, but it was enough to shift the momentum. The internet pounced, and the phrase became a meme, a headline, a weapon. While Crockett scrambled for damage control, another figure stepped into the fray. Senator J.D. Vance, with no theatrics, no hand gestures, just a cold, calculated presence, appeared on Fox Business. He read a single line from a prepared statement, his voice as clear as a gavel. No one stands above the law, not even those who claim to raise money for the people. He didn't smile, didn't elaborate, he didn't need to. The line was surgical, and America, whether it wanted to or not, tuned in. The Senate Finance Subcommittee called an emergency hearing. Terms like ActBlue, donor fraud, and foreign money seeped into Washington's bloodstream. Staffers whispered, aides refreshed FEC data pages, lobbyists made discreet calls. In a sealed hearing room in the Capitol's East Wing, a chair was set for Jasmine Crockett, not as a witness, not as a victim, but as the first subject in a story just beginning to unravel. This wasn't just about one politician. It was about a machine, a funnel, a system that had quietly moved billions while claiming to represent the people. The question now was, which people exactly? The answer would begin behind closed doors, in a room where transparency was ironically outlawed for the sake of formality. No cameras, no microphones, just mahogany panels, marble silence, and a flag that seemed to eavesdrop from the corner. Senator J.D. Vance sat at the head of the table, stone-faced, spine straight, fingers steepled in a patience that felt like it was running out. Then she entered. Jasmine Crockett, the embattled congresswoman, who by now had likely memorized 3 versions of her defense, each tailored for a different media outlet. She walked in, smiling. Not the smile of innocence, but the kind you see when a poker player realizes the table is playing blackjack. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for a teleprompter that wasn't there. Finding none, she settled for a glare, sharp enough to cut through policy. Vance didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He didn't even shift in his seat. "This hearing," he began, his voice firm but ice-cold, "is convened to examine the integrity of donation pathways facilitated through ActBlue and to determine the accountability of any campaigns." A pause just long enough to make her name sting, including that of Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Democratic staffers clutched their notepads. One leaned toward Crockett and whispered, "Stay calm. They've got nothing but smoke." Crockett gave a brief nod, more annoyed at having to feign calm than anything else. But smoke, as it turns out, often comes from fire. The room was polite, but it was the politeness of a standoff. Smiles that didn't reach the eyes, chairs that creaked too loudly, a ceiling fan spinning so slowly it seemed to wait for the first verbal grenade. The atmosphere shifted, not in sound or law, but in weight. It was the moment before a trial begins, when the accused still believes their press release will save them, and the prosecutor is sharpening their first exhibit like a guillotine. This room, it wasn't about who shouted loudest, it was about who brought receipts, and J.D. Vance had a folder full of them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He simply opened the folder like a surgeon revealing an X-ray. A moment later, the screen behind him lit up with a scanned document. "Donation record 2765, he said, his voice flat as a cardiogram. $16,418, attributed to Harold and Margie Daniels, Houston, Texas. He turned to face the room. This couple, Harold and Margie Daniels, have lived in the same zip code for 42 years. They've never run a campaign, never hosted a fundraiser, never downloaded the ActBlue app. And yet, according to FEC filings, they've donated over $16,000 to Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. A pause, just long enough for the lie to echo. Murmurs started, first a whisper from the Republican side, then nervous chair shifts among Democrats. Crockett adjusted her posture, her smile retired. She leaned into the mic with the brittle confidence of someone clinging to a burning instruction manual. "Senator Vance," she said, "duplicate names aren't exactly rare. Digital systems have flaws. We've all seen autocorrect. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it thinks you meant to text your ex." A few staffers chuckled. Vance did not. He turned another page. Another document appeared, underlined, highlighted, boxed in red. "Same full names," he said. "Same address, same birth dates, same email, same phone number, same donation timestamp, repeated across 51 transactions." He let that sit. No dramatic music, just raw, absurd data. Unless there's a pair of identical twins in Houston, married to each other, living under the same roof, with a passion for online political generosity, they didn't make those donations. Laughter broke out, not from the senators, but from the gallery. Crockett didn't laugh. She glanced at her papers, as if the ink might rearrange itself into a lifeline. Her fingers tightened on her binder. Her jaw stiffened. If ActBlue was the engine, the press had just found its black box. Then came an unexpected figure, unassuming but dangerous in his irrelevance. Stephen Horn, a local journalist from North Carolina, no blue check, no book deal, just a man with receipts and no Georgetown dinner invitations. He looked like someone who could fix a printer and dismantle a narrative simultaneously. "Over 30 cases," he said flatly, standing before the committee. "Names, addresses, donation records, all filed to the FEC under real people who swore under penalty of perjury they never gave a single cent. He paused, then added with deadpan horror, "One of them was logged as donating 50 times in a single day. Either this person achieved a level of political enthusiasm unknown to modern democracy, or someone's been using their name like an ATM." Silence followed, not from shock, but from the weight of recognition. Crockett exhaled sharply and leaned forward, her tone condescending enough to warrant a parking ticket. "With all due respect, the FEC is an independent body. I don't have access to their back-end logs. I don't oversee every donor transaction. Frankly, we're entering conspiracy theory territory." She smiled, the rehearsed smirk of someone who thinks a Yale degree entitles them to dismiss a journalist with a spreadsheet. Vance didn't take the bait. He picked up a printout and held it like a scalpel. "Congresswoman, no one's asking you to audit the FEC. We're asking if you ever took the time to verify the source of the $870,000 that landed in your campaign account." The number hit like an air raid siren. $870,000. Not from lobbyists, not from unions, but from donors, some of whom didn't know they were feeling generous. Crockett shifted, not dramatically, but enough to be noticed. The committee didn't need an admission. They needed America to see what it looks like when plausible deniability flickers. The camera that wasn't allowed in the room was replaced by imagination, and it didn't have to work hard. Vance had pulled the curtain, and behind it, the machine was bleeding. He stood, his authority quiet but commanding. 7 senior executives at ActBlue have resigned within a 14-day window, he said. Not one press release, not one official explanation. These aren't interns. These are the architects of a system we've been told is too sophisticated to fail. He paced slowly, letting the silence settle. "So, if this isn't a collapse, what's the polite word for mass evacuation?" The next slide flashed. A screenshot, an internal email, time-stamped, cold as steel. "Whistleblower protections exist for a reason," it read, sent by ActBlue's general counsel. Vance raised an eyebrow, not for effect, but as punctuation. And that email was followed by an internal notice. "Account access revoked, effective immediately." The lawyer sent the alarm, and they locked him out. Is that standard HR protocol? Or is that what guilt looks like in PDF format? Gasps were too obvious. What filled the room was worse. Respectful silence, the kind reserved for funerals and failed cover-ups. Crockett's gaze dropped to her desk. Her pen hovered, but didn't move. Vance struck again, not with volume, but with precision. "Congresswoman, we're not here because one donation record looks suspicious. We're here because a structure built on anonymity, shielded by slogans, is collapsing under its own bookkeeping." Crockett inhaled sharply, opening her mouth to object, but an aide whispered, "They're peeling back layers. This is no longer about you." Vance didn't wait. "You're not the end of the thread, Congresswoman. You're the beginning." He stepped back, letting her silence speak. Then he shifted, not as accuser, but as interpreter of spin. "Why is it," he said, calm but coiled, "that every time the numbers stop making sense, your party hides behind small-dollar donors, as if repetition manufactures legitimacy?" Crockett blinked, stalling for a breath she could dress as a thought. He didn't pause. "Why is your side terrified of scrutinizing large donations, And why, despite every tech tool at your disposal, can no one confirm who these donors are? The screen flickered to life with a clip from Kamala Harris's 2020 fundraising blitz. $81 million raised in 24 hours from the people. The narrator's voice was rich, overproduced, as convincing as a used car commercial with a Harvard degree. Crockett exhaled, smiling faintly, the effort visible in her eyes. "We have a community, Senator," she said, leaning back. "We energize people. We reach the grassroots. Not everyone needs a billionaire to fund their beliefs." It was smooth, rehearsed, almost enough for a friendlier audience. But this wasn't MSNBC, and Vance had heard enough bumper sticker wisdom. "A community," he repeated slowly, "one so enthusiastic that not a single member recalls making the donation." A chuckle came from the press bench, then another, then something lethal, a shift. Senators glanced sideways. Staffers compared notes, not out of duty, but doubt. The mask had slipped, revealing not corruption in the usual sense, but absurdity masquerading as virtue. Vance nodded, almost with pity. "You don't need a billionaire, Congresswoman, but you do need one donor, just one, who remembers their name on your report." He folded his notes, and in that moment, small dollar donor went from shield to punchline. Crockett reclaimed the floor, not in panic, but with timed precision, like someone who knew how long shame could linger before turning to rage. "Let's not kid ourselves," she began, her voice sharp, stripped of polish. "This isn't about bookkeeping or integrity. This is the same circus you ran with Hillary, the same spectacle you pulled with Hunter. You target Democrats with visibility, stir the public, and call it justice." Her words had rhythm. She wasn't flailing. She was framing. Some Democrats sat taller, nodding slightly. "I represent a voice that disrupts your narrative. A black woman, unapologetically progressive, raising money the grassroots way. Of course, that threatens you. So, you flip the script and pretend to be guardians of transparency when in fact, Senator Vance," she turned to him, fire in her tone, "you're running a campaign for Donald Trump." The sentence cracked like a whip. She stood. No microphone needed. "You invoke the FEC, parade cherry-picked data, and pose under fluorescent lighting like a moral referee, all while doing the bidding of a man who paid hush money to a porn star with campaign funds." Gasps weren't spoken. They were felt. Crockett wasn't aiming to win the committee. She was aiming for the clip. This isn't about ethics. It's about 2028, and Senator Vance just handed in his audition tape. All eyes turned to Vance. He didn't move, didn't blink. With one glance at the surveillance camera, he spoke, barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through rhetoric. "If the truth is politics, Congresswoman, what does that make the lie?" Silence, not just tense, but consequential. Crockett had made it about herself, while Vance, calm and unshaken, remained the one not on trial. Then came an unexpected player, one who didn't believe in trials, only stress tests. The monitor flickered, and Elon Musk appeared, part tech warlord, part meme generator. T-shirt, hoodie, unbothered. He looked like a man who'd just shut down 5 departments and built a rocket for fun. "You invited me for transparency," he began, adjusting nothing, not tone, not lighting, not comfort. "So I figured, why not show up, say something useful, and make a few people uncomfortable?" Silence, not from respect, but curiosity. "Let's be clear," Musk said. "ActBlue isn't a donation platform. It's what you'd get if you gave TurboTax amnesia and access to a DNC slush fund. He tapped the screen. Two files appeared, one labeled FEC compliance, the other broken spreadsheets. I've had engineers, guys who run code for a living, tell me they were shocked to learn they donated to candidates they've blocked on social media. One said, "I thought ActBlue was a Venmo plugin." He leaned closer, casually. "Money's supposed to leave fingerprints. That's the trail. But this stuff disappears faster than a California budget surplus." Staffers stopped typing. Crockett didn't blink. Blinking is a tell. Musk continued. "This isn't about ideology. It's about infrastructure. When my superchargers get firebombed and ActBlue donations spike in parallel, I don't call that grassroots energy. I call it weaponized laundering." He tapped again. A map appeared, 7 red dots pulsing like warning lights. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are zip codes. And if that makes people nervous, it should. He looked at the camera, deadpan. "You let anonymous money flow through campaigns like free Wi-Fi, and don't be surprised when someone uses it not to change minds, but to torch transformers." That landed. One senator exhaled audibly. Another whispered about recess, but Musk cut in, voice lower, sharper, as if speaking to history. "You built a system to avoid accountability, and now you're shocked it's being hijacked by people who understand the code better than you do. You don't need a hearing. You need a firewall." The feed cut. Musk was gone, leaving a room that felt like a server farm after a breach. Vance wasn't done. He tapped the remote, casual as skipping Netflix trailers. A line of text appeared, plain, from an ActBlue Slack channel. "We have whistleblower protections in place. Use them." Silence. The kind from recognition, not shock. Vance let it hang, then flipped to a transcript, unmistakably real. "I'm not risking my job, but someone needs to speak up. This thing's going to blow wide open. Legal's distancing themselves. If they pull audit logs, we're—" No dramatics, just scared people typing faster than their ethics department could ignore. Crockett spoke, voice steady, but an octave too high. "Let's be clear. I don't run ActBlue. I've never had access to their systems. I'm not responsible for what their employees say on Slack." Vance didn't flinch. He addressed the room, but the bullet was for her. "Congresswoman, you don't have to run ActBlue. You just have to cash the checks, no questions asked." Heads turned, not in curiosity, but calculation. Party strategists did mental math on fallout. Vance stayed still. There's a difference between being uninformed and willfully blind. When the money flows to you, ignorance isn't an excuse. It's an accessory. He slid into the final revelation, like a chess player moving from sacrifice to checkmate. If the money came from people who never knew they gave, then who really gave it? The silence wasn't political. It was metaphysical. Someone had been laundering more than money. They'd been laundering accountability. Vance's voice softened, sharpening its edge. "We talk about foreign interference, ads, bots, cyber attacks, but what if the simplest route was the oldest one? Not hacking the voter, but funding the fundraiser." He clicked again. A transaction trail, time-stamped, disguised, a ping of digital currency moving from a shell NGO in the Seychelles to a US-based donation platform. "We banned the Chinese Communist Party from directly funding campaigns. That's the firewall we think holds. But tell me," he turned to Crockett, not with anger, but precision. "We banned China from buying the candidate. Did we ban them from buying the person who buys the candidate?" The sentence settled like ash after a contained fire. Crockett didn't answer, not because she was silenced, but because no rhetorical trick could cut through the smoke. When she spoke, it wasn't to reclaim control. "I didn't intend for this," she muttered, her tone hollow. "I wasn't aware of fake identities. That wasn't in my scope." She wasn't confessing, she was stalling. Vance gave no reaction. "Exactly," he replied, precise as a budget cut. "That's why we don't need well-meaning operators who skim terms and blame the software. We need stewards who understand power isn't a stream to stand in, but a current you're responsible for redirecting." Movement came from the second row. A senior Democrat, grey suit, maroon tie, stood slowly, jacket unbuttoned, papers loose. The posture of a man disentangling himself from a toxic asset. Crockett tracked him with her eyes, not to plead, but to confirm she'd become a speech that no longer fit the program. Vance didn't offer closure. When negligence wears a lanyard labeled good faith, it doesn't absolve you. It proves the building was compromised before the breach. The question isn't who kicked down the door last, it's who built it so thin. He didn't slam a gavel or recite a verdict. "I'm not here to prosecute anyone today," he said, almost conversational. "I'm here to make sure the American people understand the real design. A system that turned good intentions into cover stories and citizens into camouflage for untraceable money." Crockett gathered her papers slowly. No rebuttal. She exited through the side door. No cameras, no look back. Not out of defiance, but awareness that the spotlight had moved. That evening, headlines rolled across every outlet. Senate committee urges nationwide audit of ActBlue. FEC opens first full-scale investigation in 2 decades. No celebrations, no podiums, just a public reckoning with a question they didn't expect. Who's speaking for you when your name appears in a system you've never touched? In the report's appendix, Vance's closing line burned. "Transparency has never killed a soul, but lies have toppled nations." He signed his name, put down his pen, and walked out, not to applause, but to the sound of a country beginning to question.